This happened a few weeks ago during one of my night shifts. I'm Clara, a nurse at the old hospital. I thought I had seen it all after years in the ER, but what I encountered that night was beyond anything I could have imagined. The hospital was massive, but it felt huge and empty at night. The lights flickered, shadows danced in the corners like they had a life of their own. I sat at the nurse's station, shuffling papers, when I heard soft crying coming from an empty patient room down the hall. My heart dropped. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. With my chair squeaking under my weight, I stood up. The hallway felt longer and darker. I approached the room slowly, my breath steady. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but an empty bed and an unmade pillow. "Okay, Clara, it's fine," I muttered. I shook my head and returned to my paperwork, but the papers felt unbearably heavy. A chill crept through the air. The cries were faint, almost like whispers. Was I losing my mind? Patients began talking about shadows watching them. I felt my pulse quicken. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, just out of sight. One stilled night, I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me. Then it happened. I was checking on Mr. Jenkins, a sweet man on the mend, when he shot up in bed. Panic filled his eyes. "She's here," he breathed. "Who?" I asked, wishing I'd kept my mouth shut. "The woman in white." My skin prickled. I turned, but there was nothing, just the coolness of the night air. Each shift became worse. I would hear faint cries echo in the night or spot shadows darting away when I turned my head. I decided to stay alert, but the eyes of the dark held secrets I didn't understand. I began to dread the silence. Then one night I found myself alone in the halls. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I stopped at the nurse's station, my pulse racing. Then I heard it again. The faint cry. It was coming from the hallway. With uncertainty, I stepped forward. I felt that chill wrap around me once more. At the end of the corridor, I saw her. A figure in a faded white dress. She stood there, still and silent, staring right at me. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but nothing came out. I felt trapped, and then, in an instant, she vanished. I stumbled back, gripping the counter to steady myself. Light flickered above, and I saw something in the corner of my vision. Shadows moved quickly, darting away. I could feel the heaviness of dread settle in my chest. I couldn't ignore this strange feeling anymore. Night after night I had seen her. Was she a ghost? Was this real? I didn't know what to do. The breaths of the hospital echoed louder, and the cold enveloped me again. By my next shift I was desperate for answers. I wandered the halls seeking her out, but she was gone. Instead, a patient whispered to me, "She comes when you're alone." I froze. Was she feeding off my fear? Suddenly, I felt cold fingers brush my arm. I turned to find her right there, smiling softly. My breath caught in my throat. I realized then, this was no ghost. This was a warning. A reminder that I might never leave the place I thought I knew. My night shifts would never be the same. That night, dread hung in the air thicker than ever. I walked down the hallway, each step echoing in the silence. I was nervous but also determined. I had to confront whatever was haunting me. When I reached Mr. Jenkins' room, I found it empty. His bed was made, and the solitary chair was pushed aside. As I turned to leave, I noticed a flickering light down the hall. It seemed to call me, drawing me closer. I took a shaky breath and walked toward it. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground wanted me to turn back. When I got closer, I saw that the light came from a small room usually reserved for storage. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear soft whispers. My heart raced. I pressed the door open wider, revealing boxes stacked high and dusty equipment lined along the walls. It looked abandoned, yet those whispers were there, louder now, swirling around me like a haunting melody. "What are you doing here?" A voice cut through the whispering. I spun around, but there was no one in sight. My throat tightened. I felt as if I had stepped into a trap. The emptiness of the space felt wrong, like something was waiting for me. The whispers stopped suddenly and the room went cold. I could see my breath in the air. Panic surged within me. I turned on my heels and fled into the hallway. My mind raced. I thought I was imagining things, but the whispers had an eerie familiarity. I made my way back to the nurse's station trying to catch my breath. "You're just tired," I told myself as I tried to shake off the fear. Yet a sense of urgency bubbled underneath. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m., the witching hour. That's when I heard it again. A soft sobbing echoed throughout the corridor. No longer a distant sound, it now felt intensely close. My gut twisted. I had to find the source. Drawing in a deep breath, I set off once more, drawn by morbid curiosity. As I approached room 217, the sobbing stopped. Instead, I heard a woman calling out, "Help me!" Her voice trembled through the walls. I stepped closer, compelled. "Hello?" I called, but only silence responded. Hesitation sunk in. Was I ready for this? I pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit by a lone lamp, and there, standing by the window, was the woman in white. Her hair fell in tangled strands over her shoulders. She turned slowly, her eyes wide and pleading. "You have to listen," she whispered. My mouth went dry. "What do you want?" I stammered, noticing a deep sadness in her expression. "You cannot leave," she said, her voice haunting yet softly resonant. "They will come for you." Before I could ask who they were, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. My heart pounded. I felt an immense pressure in the air, as if something unseen was lurking, waiting for me to succumb to my fears. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the hallway, shattering the silence. My instincts kicked in. I backed away, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to find out what that noise was, but as I turned to run, I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold as ice. Everything froze. My breath, my heartbeat. I knew I had to escape this nightmare before it consumed me entirely. I spun around, ready to confront whatever had touched me. But there was nothing. The room was empty, except for the woman who still stood by the window, her expression now filled with dread. "You should go," she said, her voice shaking. Now, I didn't need any more encouraging. I bolted for the door, my heart racing. As I rushed into the hallway, the world outside felt unreal, like I'd just stepped from a dream into a nightmare. The muted gray walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating. I turned to look down the corridor, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but it was quiet. Too quiet. The lights flickered again, and I felt a renewed wave of panic wash over me. I started down the hallway, clutching my arms to ward off an icy chill. The sobbing had stopped, replaced instead by an unsettling sense of emptiness that echoed in my ears. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the nurse's station. Against my better judgment, I approached, legs trembling. Each cautious step echoed too loudly in the silence. I peered cautiously around the corner, half expecting something terrible to leap out. Nothing prepared me for what I saw. A dark shadow loomed over the desk, its form indistinct and amorphous. I wanted to turn and run, but something held me in place. I leaned in, straining my ears to catch the haunting whispers filtering through the silence. "They're waiting. They're coming." The voice was faint, but the urgency was clear. I could feel my heartbeat quickening, a frantic symphony against the stillness. Just then, a cold breeze rushed past me, pulling at my scrubs. I felt it tugging at my hair, drawing me backwards. I panicked and stumbled away from the desk, grasping desperately for something, anything to ground myself. Then I remembered the woman. Her warning echoed in my mind. "They will come for you." I had to get out. The corridors felt like a maze, twisting and turning into darkness. I sprinted past empty rooms, ignoring the disembodied whispers that called out in despair. As I approached the exit to the stairwell, a heavy thud resounded behind me, making me freeze in my tracks. I felt as if the whole building was alive, pulsating with unseen forces. Turning, I saw the door to room 217 slowly creak open. A sliver of light spilled out, casting a ghostly glow in the dark hallway. Something compelled me to move towards it, faltering between fear and curiosity. But then I heard it again, the gentle weeping, now filled with panic. "Help me!" The urgency in her tone set my nerves aflame. I took a tentative step forward, but suddenly the overhead lights went out completely. I was plunged into an impenetrable darkness that blanketed the corridor. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet, as though it could give way at any moment. "Please." The whisper came again, and I felt a sudden rush of cold air. It engulfed me, making it hard to breathe. I stood frozen, torn between the desperate cries and the gnawing dread building inside me. The door creaked wider, and I could almost see the figure of the woman standing in the light once again. This was it. I couldn't turn back. I stepped hesitantly into the light, a sense of dread coiling tightly in the pit of my stomach, bracing for whatever awaited me next. The moment I stepped into the light, the chill in the air dissipated, but not the tension. The woman stood there, her features clearer now, but still shrouded in urgency. Her eyes locked onto mine, fear apparent in her gaze. "You shouldn't be here," she said breathlessly. "You need to leave." Panic coursed through me again. Before I could respond, she turned slightly, her head tilting as if listening for something beyond my perception. I felt a tremor of uncertainty ripple through me. "It's too late," she whispered, this time more to herself than to me. Then I heard it too, a low, almost imperceptible murmur that seemed to seep from the walls around us. It was as if the hall itself were alive, breathing in the shadows, drawing closer. My heart raced faster as dread washed over me. "What do you mean?" I blurted out, trying to anchor myself in the moment. "What's happening?" She stepped closer, the light casting long shadows across her face. "They come for those who enter uninvited. You don't belong here." Her voice was intense, and I could feel the gravity of her words weighing down on my chest. But I couldn't leave just yet, not when there were answers hanging in the air. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" "Run!" she shouted suddenly, making me jump. Her urgency lit a fire under my feet, and I wanted to sprint back the way I had come. But before I could move, the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like an unseen storm. The structure trembled, and the lights flickered uncertainly above us. In that moment, the door behind her slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the hollow hall. The breath hitched in my throat. "Let me out!" I cried, panicking. I grasped for the handle, but it was locked tight. "Don't fight it," she pleaded, her voice becoming insistent. "We need to—" A piercing scream erupted from the darkness down the hall, drowning her out. It was followed by a cacophony of voices rising in an unintelligible frenzy. Something worse awaited me, and I could sense the presence drawing nearer, a force more malignant than I'd ever imagined. The woman turned back, her face twisted in anguish. "They're coming. You have to do what I say." Just as she finished her sentence, the lights clashed and went out again. This time, I felt something brush against my arm, cold and clammy, making my skin crawl. I gasped and stumbled back, lost in the pitch-black void, feeling around desperately for a way out. Then, a surge of light flared back on. But it was different now. The room seemed more distorted, the shadows more pronounced. Shapes emerged, faces twisted with agony, almost melding into the walls around me. My breathing quickened as terror flooded my senses. "Find the exit!" The woman's voice cut through the confusion. "Now!" But I didn't know where to go. The whispering stepped up, a chorus of promises and threats. Each voice seemed directed at me, urging me to succumb to the terror. I could feel my resolve begin to crumble under the weight of it all. That's when I glimpsed the flicker of movement. Someone or something loomed just beyond the edge of the light, its form flickering in and out of focus. My instincts kicked in hard. I had to make a decision, and fast. But before I could move, it lunged toward me and my world went dark once more. Everything blurred and the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. I braced myself, heart racing, praying that there was a way out of this nightmare. When the darkness lifted again, I found myself lying on the cold, hard floor. Panic coursed through my veins as I bolted upright. The hall was unchanged, yet I could feel a tension more tangible than before. The woman was gone, leaving only the echoes of her voice swirling in my mind. Find the exit. I looked around frantically. The whispers continued, now accompanied by faint thuds like footsteps that didn't belong to anyone real. The air felt heavier, thick with something I couldn't see. I had to keep moving. With a shaky breath, I scrambled to my feet and darted toward the nearest doorway. Each step echoed, and I had the distinct feeling that I wasn't alone. Shadows danced in my periphery, flickering like dying flames. I had to be quick. My instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. I pressed against the doorframe, hesitating for just a moment as I listened for any signs of danger. The whispers intensified, bumping against my eardrums, urging me to turn back. But the thought of whatever lay behind was far worse than what might lie ahead. Descending a narrow stairwell, I tried to ignore the ghostly moans and sighs that drifted through the air. Each creak of the stairs beneath me made my skin prickle. As I neared the bottom, I spotted a faint light emanating from below, the only sign of hope in this place of horrors. When I reached the last step, I hesitated at the threshold. The light flickered, revealing what looked like a deluge of objects strewn across the floor, discarded medical equipment, forgotten files, and unopened letters that might hold clues to this twisted place. I began flipping through the letters, looking for anything useful. Most were dated years ago, filled with cold, sterile talk about procedures and patients. Then one caught my eye, highlighted with a red marker. I unfolded it and read, "She will return unless..." My heart dropped. Return? Who? Before I could contemplate further, a loud bang reverberated through the darkness behind me. The sound was close, too close. I turned to see a shadow darting in and out of the peripheral light. It was faster than I could react. Adrenaline surged again, and I bolted down the corridor, the legacies of the past chasing me like hounds. Suddenly I felt a chill seize my body. The air grew frigid, paralyzing, and from the corner of my eye I saw them. A procession of figures, their faces obscured, flitting through the walls like smoke. Their whispers melded into a single chilling call. Join us. A rush of dread ignited my fight-or-flight response. I sprinted toward the light, desperation propelling me forward. That's when I realized something. They weren't just apparitions. They were echoes, pieces of lives lost within these walls, and I was their next target. Just as I reached the doorway, I could feel the cold fingers of their presence brushing against me. Heart pounding, I stepped through the threshold, realizing I had nowhere left to run. The door slammed shut behind me, but I sensed a hollow space before me. I took a deep breath, feeling an unnerving calm wash over me. "What do you want?" I shouted into the void. And that's when I knew. I had to face whatever awaited me in the darkness beyond. The darkness enveloped me as I stepped into the room. The air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I squinted, trying to make out my surroundings. Shadows lined the walls, contorting and twisting, but I had to focus on what was in front of me. A flicker of light caught my eye. I turned to see an old table lampshade, its fabric stained and torn. The bulb flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced menacingly. Glancing around, I noticed rusted gurneys and stacks of old equipment piled in corners, forgotten remnants of a time long gone. A chill shot down my spine. This place was a graveyard of memories. Suddenly a sound rang out, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails clicking against glass. I froze, instinctively retreating a step. The sound was close, almost behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the oppressive darkness and the flickering light. Get a grip, I told myself, breathing heavily. I could feel fear creeping up my throat, but I forced myself to move deeper into the room. I couldn't let the ghosts of this place cloud my judgment. The message from that letter echoed in my mind. She will return unless... What did it mean? Who was she? I needed answers, but it felt like every moment I spent lingering only drew their attention to me more. The tapping returned, louder now, and I felt something brush against my shoulder. The sensation sent me reeling. I swung around, ready to confront whatever was there, but it was nothing. Just an unfathomable darkness that felt alive. That's when I noticed a doorway at the far end. There was no hesitation this time. I dashed toward it, heart pounding in my ears. As I approached the threshold, a piercing scream split the air, echoing around me. My blood ran cold. I didn't want to look behind me, not now. I bolted through the doorway, tumbling into what appeared to be an office. A desk was littered with old files and dusty notebooks. My eyes darted around, searching for anything that might give me a hint. Suddenly, I heard that tapping again. Only this time it was right outside the door I had just rushed through. I felt a surge of urgency. As I opened a drawer, my fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. I pulled it out, revealing an antique key. My heart raced. Could this be what I needed to escape? But before I could think further, the door creaked open, revealing a silhouette shrouded in darkness. "Help me," a voice whimpered, barely audible above the pounding of my heart. I squinted into the darkness, trying to see who or what stood there. The figure moved closer, the flickering light throwing its features into stark relief. I felt a wave of recognition and horror wash over me as the figure materialized. And then, everything went dark. I jolted awake, gasping for breath. My eyes blinked against the darkness, but I was still enveloped in it. Panic set in, and I scrambled to my feet. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. The musty air felt suffocating, each breath a struggle as I took stock of my surroundings. The office was empty now. The desk, once crowded with remnants of the past, was bare. I could hardly breathe, and the tapping from before was louder, more insistent. I pressed my back against the wall, scanning the room, trying to find a clue, anything. That's when I noticed a faint glow peeking from under a pile of notebooks. I moved toward it, my legs shaking. As I lifted the yellowing pages, I found a flashlight buried beneath. I clicked it on, the beam slicing through the oppressive dark. What I saw made my stomach churn. The walls were covered in notes, scribbled reminders, frantic messages scrawled in an unknown hand. "She will return," one note read. "At the witching hour," another warned. It was all about her. But who was she? Suddenly, a chill enveloped me, and I turned to see the door still ajar, a silhouette just barely visible. "Please, help me," the voice pleaded again. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but I needed to know. I took a cautious step toward the doorway, the flashlight illuminating the ethereal figure. It looked vulnerable, but I could see shadows swirling around it. The moment I stepped closer, the figure dissolved like mist, leaving behind nothing but a chill that settled over my skin. I felt a surge of disappointment and fear. What did it want from me? My fingers tightened around the key I had found. I had no time to think, no time to question my choices. I knew I had to find out what was happening. With the flashlight guiding my path, I crossed the threshold into the hallway, which stretched out ominously. The tapping seemed to pulse through the air, now echoing against the walls, taunting me. With every step I took, I felt as if something was watching me, waiting for me to falter. Ahead, I spotted an old wooden door barely hanging on its hinges. The air was thick with unease, but I approached it anyway. Gritting my teeth, I turned the antique key in the lock. It clicked, sending a shudder through my hands as the door creaked open, revealing another shadowed expanse. Just as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. I whirled around, heart racing. I was trapped, surrounded by darkness again. The cold filled the room, and in the silence that followed, I heard a whisper, a voice I recognized. "I'm afraid she has awakened," it said. I stood frozen, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just a ghost haunting this place. It was something much darker. My breath caught in my throat, choking me as dread washed over me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. But the only reply was silence. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something was lurking just outside the beam of my flashlight, and this time, I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront whatever was waiting for me. The darkness closed in around me thick and heavy. My heart pounded in my chest as I inched backward, but there was nowhere to go. The walls seemed to close in, squeezing out any feeling of safety. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed to figure out what was happening, but panic clawed at my insides. I turned my flashlight toward the movement, revealing a flicker of shadows that darted just beyond the reach of the beam. My hands trembled, and I cursed under my breath for getting myself into this situation. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice tinged with fear. The shadows paused as if considering my question. Then, without warning, they surged forward. I flinched and stumbled back against the door, the wood digging into my spine. The flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as my shaking fingers struggled to keep it steady. As the shadows drew closer, I caught a glimpse of what lay within. There, at the heart of the dark mass, were faces, twisted and tormented, mouths agape in silent screams. I pressed my back harder against the door, the coldness of the metal key contrasting sharply with the heat rising in my body. Then everything went still. I didn't dare breathe as the shadows loomed closer, and just as I was about to turn and run, a voice echoed in the silence. "Help us!" The plea hung in the air, desperate and haunting. I felt a shiver race down my spine. "Who are you?" "What can I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. Then, from the depths of the shadows, one figure stepped forward, a transparent woman with hollow eyes. Her gaze fixed on me, filled with both longing and despair. "Find her," she whispered, pointing toward the back of the room where a glimmer of light flickered like a candle. The shadows around her swirled and shifted, creating a cocoon of darkness that felt alive. Panic surged within me again. "Is she the one from the notes?" "Who is she?" I asked, desperate for answers. But the ghostly figure only shook her head, her expression shifting into something akin to sorrow. Before I could press her further, she faded back into the mass of shadows, leaving behind the faint echo of her words. "Find her." I stood in stunned silence. I knew I shouldn't have felt sympathy for the restless spirits around me, but there was a connection I couldn't shake. My mind raced with questions. I had to move, but where to? It seemed my only choice was to follow the flickering light. I steadied my breath, feeling the fear crush down on me like a weight. With the flashlight guiding my path, I advanced cautiously towards the glow. As I got closer, the light flickered and dimmed, almost teasing me. I reached out my hand, barely brushing the edge of the radiance, when a deafening wail erupted from the darkness behind me. Someone was in the house. I spun around, the flashlight beam shaking wildly as I searched the room. A figure emerged from the shadows, and all at once I knew I was not alone. I squinted into the darkness, my breath hitching in my throat. The figure moved closer, and though my heart raced, I couldn't make out any details. I felt paralyzed. Then, suddenly, the flashlight flickered and dimmed, leaving me in half-light. "Who are you?" I shouted, forcing my voice to stay steady. "What do you want?" The figure paused just on the edge of the light's feeble reach. I could hear faint movements like the rustling of fabric or maybe breaths. "Help," it rasped, echoing the same desperate plea as the spirit from before. "Help you with what?" I was losing patience, but fear made it hard to sound brave. I took a cautious step closer, the beam of my flashlight wavering like my resolve. Just then the figure lunged into the light. She was a young woman, her clothes frayed and torn, her face streaked with dirt and despair. Her eyes were wide and hollow. "You have to find her, before it's too late." "Find who?" I pushed, trying to catch a glimpse of her frantic expression. The shadows behind her rippled, pulsating as they seemed to gather their energy. "The one in the reflection," she cried. "In the mirror. You have to hurry." Before I could process her words, she dissolved into a cloud of vapor, leaving me standing alone in the dim light. The dark mass behind her surged forward, and I stumbled back, desperately seeking a way out. "Wait," I yelled. "What do you mean?" But it was too late. She was gone. The flickering light flickered again, and this time it felt like a heartbeat. There and gone. I turned back towards the grimy mirror that hung on the wall, sensing an urgency I couldn't ignore. The woman wanted me to find someone, but who? I felt a knot tighten in my gut. As I approached the mirror, I could see my own reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But there was something behind me, something not reflecting. I jerked my head around, but there was only shadows pooling in the corners. Then I noticed a glimmer in the mirror, a flash of movement that shouldn't have been there. I turned, but nothing appeared in the physical space. My pulse pounded in my ears and I felt lightheaded. Focus, I told myself, sailing through the fog of nerves. I walked closer, poking my fingers into the edges of the glass, hoping to summon whatever secrets were hidden there. Suddenly, a chilling wind whipped through the room. The mirror darkened, and right before my eyes the image shifted. I saw her, the same woman. She stood behind me, her gaze pleading. "That's her!" I shouted, spinning around, but I was alone again. An icy breath grazed my neck and my skin prickled at the sensation. I glanced back at the mirror and my heart sank. The woman was still there, but now there was something else, an outline of a much darker figure looming beside her. "What are you?" I gasped, frozen in fear. Then, as if sensing my presence, the figure turned its head toward me. Its eyes gleamed with malice. I stumbled back, desperate to escape the icy grip of whatever horror awaited on the other side of the glass. The mirror cracked, sending a spiderweb of fractures across its surface. Then everything went dark. I stumbled through the dark, my heart racing. The oppressive silence that followed left me with an even greater sense of dread. I held my breath, straining my ears for any sound, any movement, waiting for the chaos to erupt again. But nothing came, and the air felt thick, alive with tension. I blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness. Suddenly the ground beneath me jolted and I realized I was no longer in the room with the mirror. I was on the floor of the hallway, as if the world had shifted beneath my feet, allowing me to escape the terror of the other side ahead of time. The dim overhead lights flickered above, casting shadows that seemed to twist and writhe. For a moment I thought I'd imagined the figure, the whispers, everything. But deep in my gut, I felt the weight of the presence still lingering, echoes of lost souls, forever trapped within these walls. I looked back towards the direction from where I'd come. There it was again, the gentle sobbing but now laced with panic. I had to get away from it. My instincts screamed at me to move, to act. I rose quickly, racing down the corridor, heart pounding in rhythm to the resonating fear. I reached the exit of the hallway, feeling a mixture of relief and tension wash over me as I spotted the exit sign glowing faintly ahead. Just a few more feet, I urged myself, forcing my legs to pump quicker. Behind me, whispers began to swell, like the rising tide of a storm. They were calling, beckoning me back, but I wouldn't succumb. Not this time. As I pushed through the door, the night air rushed over me like a bomb, overwhelming in its freedom. I inhaled deeply, each breath filling my lungs with clarity. I was outside, standing under a sky full of stars, the hospital looming ominously behind me. I turned back, expecting something to emerge, but nothing followed. The dread inside me connected with every story I had ever heard from patients or co-workers about the hospital. It had a reputation. It was said to hold dark secrets, echoing with the stories of those who had never found peace. What had I seen? A warning? A consequence of generations of fear and despair? I stumbled toward my car, hands shaking. But just as I reached for the door handle, I hesitated. What about the woman in white? Was she a lost spirit? Or something deeper, something that thrived on our fears? I had escaped, but at what cost? There were questions I wouldn't be able to answer. Was there truly a her to be found, or would these echoes and whispers continue swirling around the hospital, waiting for someone else to cross their path? I slammed the car door behind me, shaking off the uncertainty. I would drive away from this place and leave it behind for good, but deep down, I knew it would never truly leave me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her standing there, but only my own wide eyes stared back. I drove away from the hospital, the neon lights of the city growing brighter with every mile. Yet as I turned the corner, a chill settled over me in the silence of the night. I couldn't help but wonder if I had really escaped, or if I merely stumbled into an uncharted chapter of my life. And there it was, sinking in gradually. From the depths of the darkness, something would always call out for me, muted and haunting, just beyond the edges of sanity. As I left that city behind, part of me knew this would change everything. I'd never be able to see the night the same way again, and perhaps that was enough. The last whispers lingered in my mind, both a reminder and a warning, weaving themselves into the fabric of my reality as I drove further into the night.